Hi, and welcome back to your puppy blueprint, where you can stop guessing, wondering, and Googling how to have a well-behaved puppy and discover how to turn the chaos to calm. I'm your host, Kelly Fahey, and today I'm joined by Julie Naismith. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about Julie. Julie has her Bachelor of Science and is a trainer and behavior consultant who works solely with separation anxiety cases. Julie trained at the prestigious Academy for Dog Trainers under the apprenticeship of world-renowned trainer and force-free advocate Jean Donaldson and earned her CTC. Julie is the author of best-selling separation anxiety training guides found in the Be Right Back series of books. Be Right Back is the most widely read book on separation anxiety around the world. Julie is a total separation anxiety geek, and she will tell you that full out, and is committed to making the world a better place for unhappy home alone dogs and their stressed out guardians. She also feels privileged to have helped thousands of guardians around the world via her Separation Anxiety Heroes membership, her innovative Be Right Back separation anxiety training app, and the guidance she has given to 75,000 plus members of her free separation anxiety dog support group on Facebook. Julie is from the UK, but she currently lives in Canmore, Alberta, with her husband and 3 dogs. Today, Julie and I are going to talk about how to help your puppy be happy home alone. Welcome, Julie, and thank you for joining me today.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you, Kelly.
Super excited about this. So I know Julie, and she knows puppies are my passion. So I was super excited to have her come on board because this is a very passionate topic for me, and it's a very passionate topic for her. And so puppies, I mean, no one brings a puppy home and doesn't have a million questions or thought once that puppy enters their home. Puppy parents almost immediately start asking themselves, what should I do? Or is this right? Things aren't as seamless as, they would have hoped. Let's talk about puppies and some of the home alone issues puppy parents might face.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we're talking about this topic because I think 10 years ago we wouldn't have been even thinking about it. There used to be this big presumption that puppies don't suffer from home alone issues or don't worry about being left. And puppies get scared. We know they get scared of paper bags and they get scared of men with beards. So why will they not potentially, it's very important, potentially get scared of doing something which is really unnatural, which is being totally isolated? So I'm glad that now in 2022 and beyond, we can talk about it because it's not every puppy, but certainly some puppies do struggle with being left. And I want people to know that if they only take one thing from this discussion, it's just as in the way that we help prevent other fears in puppies, we should also be doing that work to, as much as we can, help puppies from developing a fear of being left.
Yeah, it doesn't come natural to them. And I mean, and when you really think about they're just babies in their little world. They're with mom and their litter mates, and they get plucked away one by one and put in new homes with new people. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, they spent all their life in one place in the same environment with the same people around them, and then they go home on a Friday and Monday morning somebody goes off to work and 10 hours later comes back. So the thing is about puppies, they're so resilient, and we get so lucky with so many of them that we don't do the work, and some of them are still great, but some of them just freak out. And it's not unreasonable to think, well, yeah, okay, I get why you're so stressed out. We're asking you to do something really weird and be totally on your own for 10 hours a day. How's that going to work for you?
Yeah, it like you said, it's not natural. We've bred them to be companion animals, so it's completely the opposite of what we say this all the time. We get our dogs and then we want to undog them.
It's so true. Yeah, we spend that first few weeks on puppying our puppies. I love that, Kelly. It's so true.
Yeah, right. Like I want a puppy, but I don't want you to do all the puppy things, and we kind of want them to fit in our lifestyle and our daily day-to-day routine. but we've got to really kind of help them and nourish that relationship and everything. So,
and we've all been there with our own puppies. We get it. It's hard work. It's like, it's exhausting. You've got the list of all the things that everybody's telling you to do. So I get it. And I'm totally sympathetic to new puppy parents, because it's joyous and it's wonderful, but it's hard work too. I
right.
understand.
And you talk about how all the things that people tell you to do with your puppies. And there are so many questions that come up with that almost immediately when they bring that puppy home.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed is, and I love seeing this shift, is when I'm getting people that come to me, they are now thinking about their puppy in the crate and or being left alone. And so those questions that often come up are, should I let them cry it out? Because once upon a time, we would
Standard
just
advice.
let them cry it out.
Yeah.
And now people are like, I don't know, is that right? Or
Yeah.
how long should I let them cry it out? Because they're not quite sure whether they should, but they also feel uncomfortable when the puppy is doing it. So there's definitely a shift in thought.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
other things like, should I crate my puppy? Is it okay if my puppy sleeps in my bed, or will that create problems? So puppy parents want to get it right. They just have so many questions. What
Yeah.
do we know about puppies and separation anxiety?
Well, we know stuff about how fear develops, and we know separation anxiety in its full manifestation is a fear. It's a fear of being either alone or separated from the significant beings in your family. And we know that fear can develop even before a puppy's born. So puppies can be hardwired to develop some fear. And therefore we know that, and we see it all the time, that some puppies have just a totally different response to being left than other puppies do. And I find that when people come and start working with me and they've had a puppy that they've just not been able to get to be comfortable on its own, they've tried all the things. They've done the cry out advice that some uninformed trainers given them. They've locked their puppy in a crate. It's not like people, for the most part, sadly, most people do try these things. And yeah, for a lot of puppies, they'll just go, yeah, fine. And what I say to people is, if you've been asking yourself for 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months, is my puppy really okay on its own? Chances are your puppy isn't, because normal, I hate to use that word, but let's talk about the majority of puppies will become accustomed to this weird, unnatural thing we're asking them to do. Then we've got that population of the dog, the proportion of the dog population that just goes, no, I can't cope with this. I mean, I certainly, talking of my N of one and anecdotally, but my own dog I'm absolutely certain came hardwired with separation anxiety, but his elder sibling didn't. I'm so thankful that she didn't, because that was a light bulb moment for me, because everybody was saying to me, well, it's your fault. You're doing things. It's because he's sleeping on the bed. It's because you're not locking him in his crate and leaving him to cry 8 hours a day. And I thought, well, I created India and she never fussed him for a minute. And she slept on the bed and, I didn't do anything different. So why is he losing it for any amount of time that I'm gone? Why is he losing it? And she's just going, oh. So I don't think people should ever beat themselves up for the fact that a puppy might have come home and been kind of hardwired and predestined to become a puppy that didn't like being left. It just happens. However, and I know we're going to talk about that today, there are things I think that people can do about it that won't guarantee that your puppy won't develop a fear of being left, but that give us the best chance we've got at developing a puppy who's fine on his own.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you said before about how puppies can come with separation anxiety. We think about these puppies as being blank slates, but we know they're not,
Yes.
And that's the common misconception from the average person, is that, well, while they are resilient, they are not blank slates. We've got genetics, we've got even though they're very young puppies, whatever their experiences were before they came to us, there's a lot that factors in there with that nature versus nurture and how it all comes together. So it is feasible that you bring home an 8-week, 10-week-old puppy and they have separation anxiety. It's not just, well, they're being stubborn or they'll work it out. No, it's a true phobia that they have.
Yeah, because we know that fear can develop when there isn't a positive association, a positive exposure to something that could be potentially threatening. So, if a puppy is kind of predisposed might develop a fear of being left, and then gets a massive alone time that's scary and horrible because somebody told you to do that, because a trainer you pay good money to said, yeah, you just need to go out, go out for a couple of hours, go out for 4 hours, and just don't let him fuss, don't ignore him if he does fuss. So yeah, you're being told to do the things that if you've got a puppy who isn't comfortable with alone time, is only going to get worse with it. And we spend it's great the amount of time and effort that people now invest in socialization. I feel like everybody's kind of got that now, or we're more or less on that page, that if we want to prevent a puppy growing up into a dog that develops fears, we gently and kindly and ethically and in a very, very kind of a low intensity way, we expose them to the things that could be scary to them. We don't suddenly throw them in at the deep end. So if we think that they might end up being scared of the vets, we don't just leave them at the vets for 4 hours and get the vet to do all sorts of procedures and say, okay, you're going to be fine. We introduce them gently, we take them there, we give them treats in the reception area, we work up to having their feet handled. So we've known the drill for a really long time about how to prevent fears. We also know we can do all of that, and a puppy will still hate having its foot touched when it's an adult dog, but it's the best recipe we have for staving off fear. So for me, it was like, well, hang on a minute, this really unnatural thing of being isolated. And by the way, in the wild, if you're the lone wolf or the lone pup, even worse, you're going to die. So no wonder some of them freak out at it. Why weren't we taking those principles of fear socialization and exposure and doing it gradually and gently? Why weren't we doing that and applying it to home alone time? So
yeah, no, we should definitely do that. And we bring the puppies home and we kind of expect them to like acclimate to our living situation. Like, well, I've got to go run out, so you should be okay for this period of time. And if you cry it out, it's all part of the process. But we now know so much better than we did years ago. And like you said, the fact that we're talking about this now and more people are conscious of it is a really great thing for all of our puppies going forward. And one of the things that comes up, and there's always this big internal conflict with a lot of people, is should they use a crate? Is a crate good? Is a crate cruel? Not to mention, when a person brings home a new puppy, one of the first things they are told by a breeder or maybe the rescue is that they will need to crate that puppy, and more times often than not, without providing them any information about crates or even crate training whatsoever. So should parents be using a crate with their puppy?
It's so many things to say. So many things. Such a passionate topic of mine, and I come at it as someone who, if you go around my house now, there's probably 6 crates or more. 3 dogs though, so that's a decent ratio. If you are watching this and you're not in Canada or the US, maybe if you're not in the UK, so maybe if you're in Europe, particularly parts of Europe, so you'll be thinking, oh, not that caging thing again that those people, those English speakers, seem obsessed about. Because I've got to tell you that all around the world, dogs and puppies are being reared into perfectly well-behaved dogs who get house trained very early on, who don't destroy things in the home, who don't counter serve, and it's being done without a crate. So yeah, of course crates are good for things and not so good for other things. So people sometimes say to me, oh, you're really anti-crate, and then some people say to me, oh, you're really pro-crate. I'm like, no, I'm just like looking at the problem and deciding what's the best tool and solution we've got for that problem. And it's not always to crate a puppy. That's the problem. And I think it's too much of a blanket advice that we're going to fix all the things if only we can get a puppy to stop crying in a crate, or even if it still cries in its crate, it's still staying in its crate.
And the use of crates, and I have nothing against crates either. We have crates in our house. But I think what happens a lot is, it's so drilled into people that the puppy has to get used to the crate. The puppy needs to be in the crate, and without any training, right? And our puppies are kind of amendable when they come home. You put them in the crate and they're like, okay, you want me to go in here? And they do. But without proper crate training, they might be tolerating it, but they don't love it. And then we see a problem later. And then of course, if a puppy has separation anxiety and we put them in a crate, that's a whole other different recipe for
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
crates
not a
aren't
one size fit all.
crates aren't are you know, on their own, in and of themselves, cruel. What's cruel is locking a panicking puppy or a panicking dog in a crate. What's cruel is confining an animal to a tiny space for a long period of time. See, I feel like when we talk about dogs and puppies, we disconnect from the kind of the broader ethics of how we approach welfare in other species. Can you imagine in a zoo where it's, the thing about zoos now is everybody's saying the spaces are too small, the animals aren't getting enough enrichment. But for some reason, we've decided that for dogs, the best thing for their behavioral problem is to put them in a crate for 10 hours a day. Imagine saying that about a leopard or an elephant. We'd say, oh my goodness, that zoo needs to be shut down. So I
Yeah,
feel like
excellent point.
we're going the other way with dogs. No. So what's cruel is what we do with the crate, not the crate in itself.
Yeah.
Dogs aren't looking at it going, oh, that's a really ugly crate. Well, actually, some of them are averse to wire crates, but mostly dogs aren't going, I don't like the wire one, I prefer the wooden one. What they don't like is being trapped, being panicky, not being able to get out, having to stay in a crate for a long period of time, getting bored when they want to look out the window, or they want to just, sit on a different surface for an hour or two. That's what's not kind. That's what's not ethical about a crate.
Yeah, and that that it, old advice or wrong advice about the puppy should only come out of the crate because they have to get used to it to go potty and all of that. So that puppy is spending all this time in the crate. No wonder they don't like it. I mean, look, we all went through COVID. How stir crazy were we all being in our house, like, and our house is much bigger than a crate, but we were confined. We couldn't get out. We were restricted from the things that we want to do, that we like to do. And some people, we were a little more groggier some days than others.
And we didn't have choice either. And we know
choice.
that that's a big influence on mental health. And we know that for dogs too, don't we? Well, we know from the studies of going back to zoo animals, that things like zoochosis are caused by that lack of not just the natural environment, but no choice over your environment. And dogs get very little choice over their environment as it is. So let's not reduce it even more by saying to a puppy, your world is going to consist of this little box for the next however many weeks.
Yeah, and same here. We've created puppies and we've not created puppies. When our family raised seeing eye puppies, they needed to learn to be crated, to like a crate, but they weren't meant to sleep in the crate overnight because the blind person needed access to their dog. So the puppies needed to learn from a very young age where to sleep, and they weren't confined by a crate. And we didn't have puppies that were, like you said, counter surfing, house training accidents. And there is a place for these. Like I said, we use them, but we make sure that we use them in a way that's the puppy's welfare is taken into consideration. Like I have the rules of how long a puppy should be in a crate and no longer, because it just becomes cruel after a while, that it's just too long. It's not good for their well-being and their welfare.
Yeah, and I find with lots of pet parents that they're really struggling through this one because they feel like they should be crating their puppy, and they either don't want to do that, or they've got a puppy who doesn't want to be in there, and they're just battling through it. And my advice, it's okay, just get your puppy out of the crate. Remember, lots of countries in the world, puppies never seen inside of the crate. And yes, you can house train your puppy without them being crated. Yes, you can stop them chewing without them being crated. So take the pressure off yourself, not just the puppy. If it's not working for you and your puppy, that's okay. Equally, if you don't want your puppy on the bed all through the night. I mean, I can't think of anything better, but then, horses for courses. Not everybody wants a puppy on their bed at night. If you find that the only way to prevent your puppy from getting on the bed is to crate them, then do it gently. Use a really gradual crate training plan that gets them to absolutely love being in their crate, so much that you almost don't need the door. I always say that the door is our way of saying the crate training is not working, because you get a really well crate trained dog, and you've seen this, haven't you, in adult dogs. You can sometimes open the crate door on them, and all that happens is their head lollets out. You're like,
absolutely.
You can come out now, and they're like, do you know what? No, so comfy in here, I'm fine.
Yeah, or they go to bed at night and they go into their crate and they flop down, they lay down, you have to shut the door, you wake
Yeah.
up in the morning and then they come out and they do that little stretch and they're ready to go. We didn't have to close
Happier.
them in. They were perfectly fine being in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and there are other options. I've had clients who they really were working on crate training for their puppy, and despite their best efforts, the puppy wasn't loving it. And it's
Yeah.
important to recognize that. And so, the one day they said, I'm doing this, and I don't feel like we're making much progress. I said, fine, then we're just going to abandon the crate. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
there's something, the puppy's something's going on here. The puppy's not loving it. And so we then, when they had to go out, we just put gates up in the kitchen and we left the crate in the kitchen open if the puppy wanted to go in. It was all at
Yes.
their free will. Puppy didn't ever want to go in there, even at their free will. Puppy did not love that crate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not going to make any sense to keep forcing the puppy in there. They're telling us there's something I don't like about this. There's something scary. There's something that is uncomfortable. And so we have other ways that we can do this. And then of course, when puppy got a little bit older, puppy didn't need to be as confined while they ran,
Yeah.
errands and everything. So there's definitely ways to do that. We work with our new puppy. He knows how to be gated if he needs to be gated in a room because we need some management tools. He knows how to be in his crate if he needs to be. And he knows if I put an X pen up, that this part of the house is, the only carpeted part of the house, and we're not going to go down there if you're
Yeah.
unsupervised because we're, with the
Yeah.
house training and everything. So we use a couple of different methods and
Yeah.
everything. But
And it's working. You're making it work. Yeah.
yeah, and if he didn't like the crate, we would have folded it up and we would have put it
Yeah.
away and we would have, did something different like we're doing with other parts of the house. So I think that's really important, is for people to recognize how their puppy is really doing with it. And if it's not working and you feel that despite your best efforts, doesn't mean that you have to do it. Like there's
Mhm.
no rule that says you must do it. Is it helpful? Sure, but there's other ways to help with crates and gates and X pens. There's different things that we can do. It's
Absolutely.
not a
Yeah.
one size.
People have got a big list of stuff that they're told to do when they've got a puppy, training wise. So if this is taking up a bunch of your time, if it's something you don't want to do anyway, or if it's something that your puppy doesn't want to do, then just take that off the list and divert your precious training and puppy time into other stuff.
Right, absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, people really want to do right by their puppy. What can people do, if anything, to prevent their puppy from developing separation anxiety?
So add it to your socialization list. So you've probably got one of those lists. You might have a book on puppyhood. I'm sure you're talking about it during this puppy blueprint. So just think about that. Think about alone time as being very similar to a vet visit or being brushed or all the other things on your socialization list. So think about the same concept. This is something that my puppy doesn't naturally like. I'm going to assume that, it's weird to them. Body handling is a classic one that we know for most animals, it's a real threat to be handled because that could mean something life-threatening. So we gradually help our puppies to be okay with brushing and nails being touched and so on. And we don't throw them in the deep end. We don't suddenly start clipping all 10 nails of a puppy's paw. We'll just, we'll gradually work up to it as they're tolerant, to whatever their tolerance is. Think about home alone time in the same way. You're just going to take a tiny bit of alone time and gently and gradually expose your puppy to it. You can even do it just around the house. You can disappear out of sight briefly with what we call the puppy peekaboo game. So you're just basically saying to your puppy, when I'm not around, it's fine and it's safe, and it's only for a tiny brief amount of time. So you're turning that intensity right down. It's like seeing a potentially scary big dog. When you take your puppy to the dog park, hopefully you're not throwing the puppy in to play with the two really big dogs. What you might be doing is sitting 300 meters away with a bunch of chicken in your hand, just saying, hey, isn't it fun we come to the dog park and there's all these big dogs and you get chicken and it's all great. So you're gently and gradually exposing them to something that might not come naturally to them. And then, if your puppy is absolutely fine, with you just popping into another room or going out for a minute or so, then you might get to go up in bigger increments of time, because chances are you've got one of the majority of puppies who does become accustomed to alone time fairly quickly. If you find that your puppy's getting really fussy and struggling and is really unhappy every single time you even think about moving away from them, then you want to think about a more structured plan for helping them with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can build this into your day, as you mentioned. When you've got your gates and your X pens, if I'm cooking dinner and I need to go get something in the other room while the onions are sauteing, people are just so used to making sure that the puppy comes with them so they can keep an eye on them, which is important for biting and chewing and house training. But if you're only going to slip out for a moment or two to go grab something, Kazoo stays in the kitchen. I go run, I come back. He's like, "Hey, where'd you go?" And then I come back. He's like, "Oh, there you are."
Yeah.
And in the beginning, he might come over to the gate and wonder if he can come with me, but he's watching. And then over time, he doesn't even care. He's still laying
Yeah.
on that side of the room
Yeah.
because those exposures of him being alone while we're home were just so gradual.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to put as much thought into it.
Mhm.
You could leave your puppy in the kitchen and then go get the book or go pay bills in the office instead of sitting there on your phone or iPad and doing it next to them.
Yeah.
Just little bits of things that you are doing, and your puppy's really learning to be separate from you, and just
Um,
simple.
absolutely. And what you're not doing is the kind of all or nothing. All right, you're home with me now, and I know before you came home with me, you were surrounded by all the stuff going on, breeders and maybe the breeder's family and maybe all these puppies, but now I'm just going to disappear for hours at end. We're not saying that. What Kelly's talking about is a really good example of just like in tiny, tiny increments. So you're really dialing down that intensity of being alone so that puppy can get accustomed to it very, very gradually. And
Yeah.
some puppies, you just go, I don't care where you are. And they're asleep in their bed and they're just like, whatever. Okay, fine. Well, maybe with them, you can start going out quite for longer periods of time, but still don't leave your puppy for 10 hours a day when you get them, or any dog, please.
Yeah, and doing those little gradual departures at home is a really good, for lack of a better word, like test so you can see how your puppy's doing. Because if I'm in the living room with my puppy and I've got in one of our rooms, I've got an X pen up because where I sit and I work, I can't see where he goes on the other side of the furniture. And so what does that mean, right? I'm going to maybe get some cords chewed, or I'm
Yes.
going to get some other things done. So I have an X pen up so I can see where he is while I'm working. And I'll get up and I'll go use the bathroom and I'll come back, or I'll get up and I'll go get a drink of water instead of making him come with me every time. And I can gauge how he's doing by those different lengths of time that I leave. So if you've got a puppy that's kind of having like a meltdown because you go around the corner, you definitely don't want to leave your puppy to go out grocery shopping.
Yeah.
So those are like really good little indicators to see how your puppy's doing and everything, because we definitely don't want to just leave the puppy and then go out holiday shopping and having lunch with family and then be gone for a while. If they're not ready for that, we'll end up having a little bit more of a problem on our hands.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And people will say to me, but how do I know that my puppy's got a problem with being alone? How do I know that it's just not normal puppy stuff? Well, the thing is, almost by asking that question, you're sort of answering it, because it isn't normal for puppies to cry and cry and cry when left over and over and over. It isn't normal for puppies to vomit and salivate and freak and throw themselves at crate doors and internal doors or front doors. And so if there's any bit of you that's wondering, is this normal? My response to that, and it isn't very scientific, this is based on seeing dog after dog and puppy after puppy, is once you've asked that question, chances are what you're seeing is abnormal behavior. It's minority behavior from puppies who aren't coping.
Right. Yeah. Because there is a difference. And it can feel a little bit tricky for people, because we're not saying just because your puppy's let out a whimper that there's a problem, but there is an element where they are trying to also figure out how to self-soothe and be by themselves. So you might go in the other room to do something and you might hear a couple of little, like, are you there? Are you coming back? But then they go about their business.
Yeah.
And that's normal. But like what we're talking about is the puppy gets distressed and they can't self-soothe, and it doesn't matter because you see all the time, I've put the music on, I've put the TV on, I left them the food puzzle, I left them a marrow bone, I left them a stuffed Kong, I left them a food puzzle toy. I've done all the things and they're still crying. Yeah, because they're terrified to be home and they don't care about any of that stuff. The only thing that's going to help them is that feeling of safety while you're there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But yeah, So little bits of like, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay over here. No biggie. It's when it progresses to more and more of that pacing, not being able to settle, doesn't care about any of the things that you may have left for them. That's a challenge. And this is where those cameras can come in handy, because if you're seeing that
So
your
true.
puppy's in distress, you can go home instead of just hoping they're going to get over it and they're going to
Yeah.
be okay.
Yeah. And puppies can be whiners. We know that they can be very
Yeah.
vocal. They can tell, just like with kids, they wear their heart on their sleeves and they'll tell you what they're thinking. And so you might hear more of that vocalization than you may get in an adult dog who's in the same situation. Like, no dog is voting for us to go out. They would much rather, for the majority of dogs, their world is all about us. So when we go, it's bad news, it's disappointing. But
Right.
there's a difference between being disappointed and scared. So how do you know when your puppy's just going, hello, what about me? Well, a good test that I always say to people is to just try changing the conditions. So if your puppy is really sleepy, you've done all the things with your puppy, if they've had lots of play and lots of affection and lots of interaction, if they've had all their needs met in terms of they've got a full tummy and they've been out and they've got an empty bladder, and if they still screech their head off when you even think about moving, chances are it's not I need something, it's not I need affection or want, it's not I want a bit of affection or I want to have some fun or I want some food. It's I need you. And that's a very different thing from I just like to be kind of hanging out with you. So try changing the conditions in which you do those little things around the house. And if your puppy is still freaking out, then yeah, we've got something more that we might want to work on.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start. And that's exactly what we did with Kazoo when he would have his, morning and he'd play with our other dog and he had all his enrichment and everything. We knew it was nap time and he was going to need a nap.
Yeah.
And so we would get him in his crate and we'd give him his awesome stuff and he would enjoy that last bit of mental enrichment and then he would conk out.
Yeah.
And I could watch him and I can see how he was doing. And so I knew based on all this data that I was like collecting, from these little exposures from going to the bathroom and nap time versus not nap time when he was sleeping,
Yes.
what I could get away with. And so I knew when he was much younger, when he was tuckered out and he played and he was fed and all of this other stuff, he was good for an hour. Now, he was always good longer than an hour, but we don't want to push it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where we get into that dangerous territory as well. He's okay. He can handle a little bit more. I made sure I carefully crafted my errands to be home for that time. So he
Nice.
never woke up and felt like I was in here long enough. You usually come get me by now. Where are you? And I just extended that time a little bit at a time around this one specific nap time.
Nice.
Yeah. Now I can leave anytime I want, whether it's earlier in the morning or whenever, because we really
Fantastic.
kind of thoughtfully crafted these little interactions that we were talking about earlier.
Love it. That's so good.
Yeah. So, because it can be hard to, it can sometimes be hard for people to figure out how to work that in. But like you said, if you work on that sleepy time, that's a really good spot to start, because if you see that your puppy's good generally for a nap for 40 minutes or a half hour, work within that time frame and then slowly expand from there and see how it goes and keep an eye on your puppy, because you want to make sure that you're not pushing your luck with it.
Exactly.
pushing it too hard and undoing all that
too much too soon.
Yeah, and all of that trust that they're building up and that safety that they're feeling, because there's a difference between being safe and secure. They're not the same things and everything. So, excellent. This has been super helpful. And I know you have something for all of everybody who's listening. Can you tell us what you're going to give our audience today?
I do. So I don't want to be doom and gloom. I'm really hoping that the vast majority of your puppies will be like most puppies and not go on to develop severe home alone problems. But it might happen. And so I've got a fantastic little cheat sheet for you that's going to help you do a bit of identification. Is it really a fear of being left, or have I got a puppy that is just quite busy and would like to be a bit more involved? And it also talks about where if your puppy does develop into a dog who then can't be left, what you can do about it. And in particular, the mistakes to avoid. So it will set you up to avoid the things that I see people do over and over again that make me go, no, don't do that. So it's a free guide, and you can get it by visiting julienaismith.com/puppy scout.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll make sure we have that link below this video so everybody can find that easily, so you don't have to worry about how you can get that. And that's going to be super helpful, because this is, again, an area where I'm seeing more and more people be a bit more conscious of it. Like they want to do right by their puppy, and they want to make sure that they're not making mistakes, because they want to make sure that puppy's comfortable, because separation anxiety is so, it's not like a dirty word anymore. Like people are aware of it, and they want to make sure that they can help their puppies and be comfortable at home. And especially if they've had a dog before that's had separation anxiety.
Oh yeah,
Want to
definitely.
make sure that, and it goes back to that, did I do something to create that? And they want to make sure that they can help their puppies, their new puppy, not have to suffer the way that their other dog may have.
And no, just be clear. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, it was my fault because I didn't do these things that they've been talking about today. Honestly, nobody tells you to do these things. I was there 10, 12 years ago as well. Nobody was telling me to do the things that we now know help puppies develop into dogs who are home alone. So do not beat yourself up if that thought even crossed your mind. Just forget, wipe it now.
It's not your fault at all. Not at all. Nope. So, well, thanks for sharing this gift with everybody. It's going to be really, really helpful. So before we leave, do you have any last minute advice or thoughts? And that might have been it, that whole little, it's not your fault.
You know what? I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
I was thinking that I'll throw in two. That's one. So if you only do two things as a result of listening to us today, know that it's not your fault, and there's things you can do about it to get your puppy to be home alone and happy, which is great. It's very empowering. And the second thing is, just remember that you just work on being home alone like you would work on any other type of socialization, and come back to the sits and the paws and all that good stuff when you've helped your puppy develop a kind of not a barrier to fear, but a bit of a tolerance of the things that might scare it later in life.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, I want to thank Julie for joining us today and talking about, rebuilding, excuse me. Oh my gosh.
Oh, goodness. You okay?
Just a little bit itchy there. So I want to thank Julie for talking to us about making sure that we build these great relationships with our puppies with trust, and what we could do for separation anxiety prevention. This has been really helpful, and I know this is a subject that everybody's got on their minds when they bring puppies home. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us today. I know these questions weigh in your mind, and you're not alone. So thank you for being with us. And I hope we could put your mind at ease and help you sort through some of these questions and concerns. Don't forget about that great guide that Julie has for you in the link below. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.